Hi, I'm Isaac and you're watching Isaac's Bushcraft and Survival. In today's video, I'm going to be covering a few different things to think about before making your survival shelter. So let's get started. So something you have to think about before camping or building your survival shelter or even setting up a tent is deadfall or widowmakers. You got to be careful of them because if you're building your tent, let's say if I built my tent over there and this tree came falling down, it could injure you or at worst crush you. This tree isn't, as you can tell, it's not super huge. Like compared to my hand, it's relatively small. So it wouldn't kill you, but it would still cause injury. And in any camping, you don't want to be injured. Especially in survival, you don't want to get injured. So in camping, you just gotta be careful as well, because even if you're in a tent, it's not gonna stop a falling tree like this. So just be careful wherever you're setting up your shelter of any kind. Just make sure you check your surroundings and make sure there's no deadfall, because I've heard of stories of people who have been killed by falling trees like this. So just be careful as you're looking around for your shelter. And also look for signs of rot, because right now this tree that I have right beside me here is rotting, and as you can see, it's a pretty big tree. It got uprooted. It's probably about 14, 15, maybe 16 inches in diameter, and the wind blew it down. And if my shelter was all the way over at this end here, I would have been crushed and probably would have been killed. So that's something you have to very much pay attention to, especially in woods like this, because as you can see, these trees grow super tall because they're competing for sunlight. So that makes them about, like, some of these trees could be 80 feet tall. That's not a stretch. Probably some of them are probably 80 feet tall. And as they get taller, they're obviously easier to get blown down, especially if they're rotten. And that also makes them more dangerous because of their sheer size. So especially on slopes, like right now I'm on a decent slope here, and if trees on the side of slopes do get weak as well, so in this area it's not the safest place to make a shelter. That's something you have to be careful of too. Try your best to avoid slopes. Not only is it easier for the trees to come down because they're on an angle and the wind can blow them down easier, but also it's kind of a pain to build a shelter. Because if you try to build a shelter on uneven terrain like this, it's not going to go well. Because instead of having your shelter or your tarp, your best bet would be to keep it on an angle like this, to have your tarp this way on an angle. Because that way, as the rain's hitting it, it's running down, and it's also running down the hill. Now, if you decide to put your tarp this way, not a good idea, because once the rain hits it, it's going to run down, and then once it runs down, it slopes, so it'll start running under your tarp into your shelter and into your bed. So that's just something you gotta be careful of as well in any of these slopes. Like the area I'm at, it's very hilly, so I can't avoid a lot of these slopes. So that's just something you gotta be very careful of with slopes and stuff, are the deadfall or widowmakers, and how to line your shelter and make sure you don't get sopping wet from rain as well. So those are a few things to also think about when building your shelter. Another thing you want to be careful of is to not build it too close to a water source. You want it to be at least a few hundred feet away from your water source. Preferably, like where I'm at, I have a water source down probably a couple hundred feet down, like almost into a valley. So up here, it could flood and flood and flood, and that'd be fine. So just try to find places that aren't super close to water sources, especially if you know it's gonna like rain heavy. Like if it's in nice summer weather and it's not gonna rain, you can camp overnight or something like that, or even a weekend by a water source, like only a few feet from it if you want. But if you know it's gonna rain, best bet is to avoid getting close to your water source, especially if it's gonna be like heavy thunder or lightning. or heavy storms. So that's just another thing you have to be careful of. And another thing as well is in trees like this, what you would preferably like to do is you'd want to raise your shelter up a bit, or what you could do is you can make like a log of some sort across and tie it to the trees and make some sort of bed that's upraised, so that way you don't have to worry about the slope. You can just sleep on that. Another thing is if you're in bear territory or any animals that are predators, do the best you can to make your shelter up high, or maybe even up in a tree if you can. If not, always try to have a fire around you or by you, because that does deter some animals. That's a very good safety thing to have a fire, especially in bear areas or wolves or any of that, because they don't like to approach fire very well. But no, in general, even if you didn't have a fire, it's just best to build your shelter up out of the way of whatever animals there are, because if you build it up maybe 10 feet off the ground, 12 feet, a bear could still get up there, but it'd be a lot harder. They'd have to climb up the tree to get you. So yeah, that's another thing to be careful of. Yeah, just be safe when you're out in the woods building shelters, because it's not the safest thing to do, depending on how you do it. You gotta be smart and think of what is around you and be spatially aware, especially, like I said, with downed trees. One of the biggest challenges or dangers is having a tree fall on you and kill you. You don't want that. So that's a major one that I can't stress enough. But other than that, there's not a lot of other things to cover as far as shelter safety. Obviously, if you can, try your best to make a shelter out of dead material. I personally try not to make shelters out of anything live, simply because I don't like cutting down live stuff. I prefer to use dead materials if possible. If you're in an area like Canada or something and you absolutely have to make a shelter, then you can use pine boughs that are green or something like that to make a shelter. But here, I'm not in a survival situation, and also I just, whenever possible, try to avoid cutting live stuff. It's just a general rule of thumb to keep forests healthy. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and hope it was informative. Like I said, just be safe however you make your shelter. Just be safe and consider all the things around you to make sure that when you make your shelter, you're safe. So one other thing that I do have to cover is make sure that if you find some sort of deep crevice, or maybe like a ditch or something like that, if it's like a deep V ditch or something, as much as it's tempting to build a shelter there, don't, because rainwater especially collects in low spots first. Before it collects up top, it'll flow down into the low spot, and if you have your bed there, you're gonna get wet. So like I said, that's another one to where if it's dry in summer, you don't have to worry. But if you know it's gonna rain, you're in trouble because you're gonna get wet. So just be careful of that. And that being said, that's all that I have for today, and I will be showing you in the next video probably how to build a shelter, or maybe a cooking video, I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.